So good afternoon once again, all participants. Welcome to the IEPA February webinar series. In order for us to have an interesting webinar for all of us to concentrate, you can see that I've muted everyone, and it's so that we can hear ourselves and we can hear our resource persons when they talk. Once again, my name is Yaw Afari Ankomah. I'm the head for communications and public relations at the Institute for Education and Planning. So you're all welcome. Now, let us go briefly into the outline for today's presentation. I'm going to give you a brief introduction of who we are at IEPA. Then I would introduce our presenters for today, outline the sequence of events for the webinar. Then our presenters will get into the presentation. Then after their presentation, we'll have question and answers and final remarks or any contributions that we may have. I would like to, at this juncture, welcome and acknowledge the presence of our participants who have joined us from Nigeria and other West African countries. You're all welcome to this webinar series. So a little brief about who we are at IEPA. So the Institute for Educational Planning and Administration was established in August 1975 based on a joint agreement between the government of Ghana and UNESCO, UNDP, to build and strengthen capacity in educational planning and administration of experts and non-experts, and to inform educational policy formulation and implementation through research. And this has been the core of the Institute for 45 years and counting. In November 2020, the Institute for Educational Planning and Administration became a UNESCO Category 2 Center for Excellence for West Africa. And this was launched by the Honorable Minister of Education in Ghana in June 2021. As a UNESCO Category 2 Center, IEPA is, among other things, to build capacity of the workforce in the education sector, in the West African sub-region, in the areas of educational planning, leadership and administration, as well as mobilize international and regional experts to provide technical assistance and policy advice to support sector-wide planning and policy development. So this webinar series is one of such events to build capacity geared towards the Sustainable Development Goal 4. And I invite all of us to visit the IEPA website, which you can see on the screen, and to learn more about us and how we can work together in collaboration in that regard. Before I go ahead and I introduce our resource persons for today on the topic, which is planning education for national emergencies, I would want to inform all of us that this webinar offers participants the opportunity to gain certificates. So if you need a certificate for this webinar, kindly indicate that in the chat column and we'll pick it up, or you can send us an email to iepa@ucc.edu.gh and we will communicate with you in that regard. For our friends joining us from Nigeria and other part of West Africa, You can also get a certificate. We'll send you the electronic version, but you would have to arrange for pickup if you want a hard copy. Thank you. So let's move on to our resource persons for today. I'm excited that we have two resource persons who are jointly going to do the presentation for us today, in the persons of Professor Yaw Afari Ankomah and Professor Martins Fabunmi. Let me give you a brief introduction of Professor Yaw Afari Ankomah, because when I looked at his profile, I'm sure reading that would take the whole webinar time. So I was very, how do you call it? Had to be very brief in taking out the salient points for this presentation. Professor Ankomah is a professor of educational planning and leadership, and he obtained his PhD in educational leadership from Florida A&M University, Tallahassee, USA. He also holds 2 research master's degrees in educational planning and management, namely M.Ed in educational planning from the University of Cape Coast in Ghana, and M.A. in educational planning and management from the International Institute for Educational Planning, IEPA-UCC. He has been the International Teacher Task Force of UNESCO National Focal Points for Ghana since 2014, and he's currently the chairman of the Specialized Committee on Education of the Ghana Commission for UNESCO and a member of the Global Education Monitoring Report Advisory Board. So participants, this is Professor Ankomah for you. And I'm sure if you want to read more about him, once you visit the IEPA website, you can find his full profile on there. The next resource person for today's webinar, who will be presenting jointly with Professor Ankomah, is in the person of Professor Martins Fabunmi. I hope I got the name right. Professor Martins Fabunmi is a visiting professor to the Institute for Educational Planning and Administration, IEPA. He is an expert in education and has served as a teacher for 46 years, from 1976 to 2022, at all levels of education. He has adequate international exposure in several countries, including America, Europe, and Africa. His qualifications include a BSc Honors in Sociology, an M.Ed Educational Management, a PhD Educational Management, an MSc Geographical Information Systems, a postgraduate diploma in education, and an LLB Law and LBL Law from University of Ibadan, Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, United States of America, City University, London, in the United Kingdom, and the Nigerian Law School, Abuja, respectively. So, I mean, for somebody who has been teaching for 46 years, he has garnered a lot of professional and academic laurels in his cap. So this webinar is going to be information and knowledge rich. Professor Fabunmi is also very versatile. He's a sociologist, an administrator, an educationist, a planner, a computer scientist, a geographer, a policy analyst, a storyteller, a solicitor, and an advocate of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, that is Professor Fabunmi, who is the second resource person for today's webinar. So without much ado, I'm going to hand over to our 2 professors who are going to take us through the presentation for today. So I'm quickly going to share their screen. So they can start the presentation. Distinguished participants, your resource persons, let's pay attention to whatever they say. Let's note our questions. We can type our questions in the chat box as they go on with their presentation, and we'll have a time for discussion of those questions. Thank you very much. Over to you, Prof. Your audience now.
Yeah, thank you, our Director for Communications, our Nana of Africa. Our esteemed audience from different parts of the world, we thank you for being part of the day. We have the outline. All of us shall be presenting in pounds. Somebody should take that.
Hello, Prof.
Yeah. Okay.
We lost you. We lost you there.
The outline. Yeah. Okay. I have. Please, as I'm seeing, projecting it. That's the outline. We shall be projecting. We shall be presenting in terms. Next slide, our approach. The most usual thing is to start the discussion of the topic with the introduction. The presenters beg to differ. We need to begin our discussion with definitions or meanings of the keywords. If we enable everyone to comprehend our discussion, our audience will understand the different components with ease as we present them. Individuals often have varying meanings of some terms or may not even be familiar with them at all. The definitions. We have before us three major terms drawn from the topic of presentation. You are not following me. The definitions. We have three key terms drawn from the topic. They are education, planning, national emergency. Education is a process of transmitting social values to citizens with a view to enhancing their knowledge, productive capacity, income, and contribution to national development. Planning is the process of preparing a set of decisions for action in the future with the view to achieving goals by optimal means. This definition was given by Yaw in 1963 and is the simplest definition of definition. The simplest definition of planning. It shows that planning is a decision taken for action to be implemented in the future with the view of achieving the educational goals by optimal means. It has a future dimension. The methods of planning education are social demand approach, cost benefit or investment approach, manpower requirement approach, and the fourth one is eclectic or synthetic approach.
Sound is also very bad.
The fourth approach is a combination of.
It's very bad.
The first approach is a combination of the first three methods. It is possible for a country to use the social demand approach for basic education, the cost-benefit analysis approach for high school education, senior high school education, and the manpower requirement approach for tertiary education. So when a nation does that, we say the nation has adopted the eclectic or synthetic approach. National emergency is an unpleasant and life-threatening situation resulting from a danger to a nation from causes which might be natural, like floods, earthquakes, or man-made, like foreign or domestic aggression, like the one we have in some parts of Africa, like Boko Haram in Nigeria, and some other insurgencies in different parts of Africa.
Thank you very much, my brother.
Okay, Professor Ankomah, before you come in, I'm going to stop sharing the slide from my end so that you can share it from your end for ease of moderation. Okay, so I'm doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so as the definition has shown, national emergencies take several forms and they come from different contexts. And when these emergencies occur, obviously, the natural way of providing education and accessing education becomes problematic. In other words, it hinders or it obstructs the provision and access to education in various forms. Emergencies may be destructive, and many of them are destructive for that matter. In situations like that, many people may lose their lives and may also lose their livelihoods and their property for that matter. If there are some people who are fortunate enough to escape death, they become displaced. So displacement is a usual experience in emergency situations. In some cases, family members, including the young ones, the vulnerable young people, the children, and so on, are separated from their mothers, their fathers, their older siblings, and so on. In other words, family members become separated, and sometimes they may not be able to see each other again the rest of their lives. They may be living somewhere, but they may have lost them through death. In some crisis situations, as in insurgencies, some family members might have been killed or captured as slaves. And very often our women are turned into sex slaves, or they are contracted into forced marriages. And this is a typical example or typical experience in the Boko Haram situation in Nigeria, in the West African sub-region. And it's also something that we may have heard of when the ISIS was in its apogee. The children and young persons of school age become vulnerable in such situations and may lose the benefits of education. As we all know, education has a lot of benefits to preparing people for life. And when these young persons when they have to access education, but are obstructed from getting it because of the emergency situation, it means they are losing the benefits of education. So by providing education to the victims, this will not only help to address their personal and social benefits, but it can also help to check or mitigate most emergencies. In other words, the provision of education also helps in addressing the question of emergencies. The COVID-19 that has been the greatest global catastrophe of modern times began in the year 2020 all over the world. And as we are aware, many homes have been affected. Many have lost their loved ones through the COVID experience. And definitely, as we are very much aware, and as we are going to see some numbers later, schools were disrupted at the early part of the onset of the catastrophe. And during the disruption, obviously, many children were not able to access meaningful education. There are cases of insurgencies and uprisings in the West African sub-region, but not only in the West African sub-region, but also across Africa. But also not only across Africa, but the whole world. Indeed, as we speak now, there are skirmishes that are pushing towards some aggression in the Asia region. Cases of conflicts, insurgencies, and uprisings create displacements that affect educational provision. And as you can see in the picture, some of the people there are young people, and what kind of education are they accessing as they hold the guns in their hands? We mentioned that emergencies create a lot of displacements. And in the displacements, if you look at the situation in 2020, there were new displacements which may be broken down into conflict and disasters. In the conflict situations, we have over 9 million, close to 10 million, which were conflict related, and over 40 million, close to 41 million, that are related to various kinds of disasters, including earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, cyclones, hurricanes, typhoons, and what else? And all these global displacements cost over 20.5 billion to manage, even in 2020 alone. There are 25 countries and territories which experienced the most displacements in 2020. And these 25 countries, we have China experiencing the highest of around 5 million people. But in their case, all the issues hover around disasters, including floods and so on and so forth. There are other countries that also suffered disasters, but there were also some few cases of conflicts, as in Philippines. If you go to Bangladesh, they suffered crisis in the form of disasters only. Coming down, we have Guatemala that suffered the least of the 25 countries, and yes, was in disasters only. Quite a month ago, Ghana was hit by a catastrophe in the form of an explosion. A vehicle that was carrying explosives that were meant for mining got exploded. The explosives exploded in the town of Epieti in the western region of Ghana. And this resulted in the destruction of the entire township. And as you can see in the picture, all the houses, almost all the houses, there are only those that are at the very outlying areas that were not affected, including, thank God, the schools that were being operated at that time. The children in the school were spared because they were in those schools outside, quite outside the township. And as we are told, about 180 people have lost their lives through that explosion. If you look at some selected countries in Africa with refugee situations, refugees in these countries, we have Uganda topping the list with over 1.4 million persons who are refugees in that country. It is followed by Sudan with just a little above 1 million. Then we have Ethiopia following next with over 800 persons. Then it goes down until we come to Togo. That has the least number, and even that one is 10,800 persons. In the Ghanaian situation, we have two groups of displaced people that the country is holding. We have asylum seekers and we have refugees. The asylum seekers are about 16%, numbering about 1,598, while the refugees are around 84%, numbering around 8,389. So the total is 9,987 as in 2021.
Thank you, Professor Ankomah. Thanks for giving us the better statistics about national emergencies happening all over the world. We've listened to statistics from different countries in Africa. We've been told about the disaster in Ghana. Then, as we are talking, there is a national emergency in Ukraine. Now, we move ahead to examine the different types of national emergency. Like my colleague said the other time, that we have natural disasters. It's one of them. What is a natural disaster? It is a major adverse event resulting from natural processes of Earth. Such include firestorms, floods, upsurge of the ocean, dust storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, volcanic eruptions, tsunami, and other violent geological processes. Of course, some disasters may also be man-made. The next one, the second one is pandemic or epidemic diseases. These refer to lab-threatening contagious diseases that spread rapidly across the national and international borders, like Ebola or Ebola virus. So such diseases may affect many people. Then the third one is insurgency and terrorism. The insurgency refers to a violent armed rebellion against authority when those participating are not the lawful combatants, that is, they are not security men in such countries. It could be associated with acts of terrorism, like Boko Haram is doing in Nigeria. Terrorism refers to deliberate commission of an act of violence to create fear through the suffering of the victims in furtherance of a political or social agenda. The fourth one is economic sabotage. This is an act designed to collapse the economy with the intention of making the citizens to rebel against the government as a result of the life-threatening economic situation of that country. Displacement, here we have displacement, different types of displacement caused by natural disaster. On board, we have the disasters that occurred between 2008 and 2020. We have different types. We have floods, which account for 49% of disasters affecting about 156 million people. Then we have storms, which account for 37.4%, affecting about 190 million people. Then we have earthquake, accounting for 10.5%, which affected 3.5 million people. We have wildfires, which accounted for a little above 1%, affecting 3.4 million people. We have droughts, which accounted for less than 1%, affecting 2.4 million people. We have volcanoes, accounted for 0.55%, affecting 1.8 million people. Then we have extreme temperature, which accounted for 0.36%, affecting a little above 1 million people. We have landslides, which accounted for 0.36%, affecting about 1 million people.
Prof. Fabunmi, Prof, we are
Yes.
struggling to hear you, so if you can speak directly into the microphone.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we are struggling to hear you. And if you can please speak more audibly for us, we will appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then flood. We have disaster caused by flood. The example being projected is the one in Syria. The Syrian children play, we have in the evening, Syrian children play in flooded areas around their tent. So you can imagine how people might have been displaced by flood. It happens in different parts of the world. Then the next one is explosion, disaster caused by explosion, like the one that happened at Yati in Ghana just last month. You can see the hollow that the explosion created. It dug out the earth surface, and the place that is projected used to be the third road. You can see the deep hollow there, and that disrupted traffic. And several houses, vehicles, and other properties were destroyed. Then, disaster could also be caused by fire disaster. Like it happened in Ghana in 2016. That was the massive fire disaster. Several children will not be found. They were declared missing. Fire disaster can be very disastrous. Then, emergency could be caused by a pandemic, like the COVID that we experienced. The image there is that of a child, a baby, being treated during the COVID-19 pandemic. Then we also have a chart on the being displayed. It shows the impact. It shows the impact of COVID-19 on global education. Here we have figures of learners enrolled at primary, lower secondary school, and upper secondary school levels of education, as well as tertiary levels. So you can see the number of people that are forced out of the school system. We have figures running to an extreme high level of 1.38 billion, not million, school children whose education was disrupted. Then, back in Nigeria, in 2015, we have images of young children that were displaced by Boko Haram in Nigeria. Like my colleague Yaw Afari said under the introduction, that national insurgency normally cause displacements, and it also disrupts the education of children. The children are the worst hit during national emergencies, with many of them losing contact with their parents, siblings, and many of such relations might have died. They may never see each other again. Children have a fundamental right to education. Often, this right is breached during emergency. When opportunity to access good quality and safe education by millions of school-age children is disrupted, like it's happening in many countries in Africa. The case of Leah comes to mind here. She was among the school children kidnapped by Boko Haram in Nigeria. Up to now, she has not been released. Then providing good quality education for these children becomes paramount. According to Nicola and Triplehorn, education saves lives. Education sustains life. It is an essential element of response to conflict or crisis. The right to education is guaranteed in the constitution of most countries in Africa. In Ghana, the right to education is guaranteed in the 1992 constitution amended in 1996. You can check Articles 25, Section 1, and Article 38, Section 2. It confirms this. Now, many international organizations like UNICEF, UNESCO, have taken the bull by the horn to cater for the education needs of displaced children. But most national governments in Africa place less emphasis on education. And in a way, they are keeping education away from these young children. And the image being displayed shows that when you keep books away from children, already we have improvised explosives, guns, and all sorts of ammunition within their reach. When you keep education out of the reach of children, you are allowing them to get hold of guns within their reach. They can use this gun to terrorize the society, thus compounding the security problem in Africa.
Thank you very much, my brother. Yes, and so in order that during crisis, during emergencies, such as those caused by insurgencies and terrorism and so on, in order that education will not be far away from the school-age children, such that rather the guns and the ammunition will be closer to them, so they will go and take them, and then they will destroy themselves and destroy others, and life will continue to be in a chaotic manner. There is the need for planning education towards national emergencies. And so we are looking at some approaches to planning for national emergencies. The first that we can talk about is social demand planning approach. Social demand planning approach. This was mentioned by my colleague when he was talking about various kinds of planning, educational planning approaches earlier on. The social demand approach entails the rehabilitation of all the victims of national emergency. That is the whole thing. It's about ensuring that all the victims of national emergencies are rehabilitated. And this is in recognition of the fact that every person has the right to education. And therefore, there's a need to make suitable and adequate provision for the children of victims of emergencies. In other words, during the emergencies, provision of education and access to education should be possible, and that it must be made as to suit the context in which they find themselves and adequate enough to take care of the situation that is prevailing. There is also participatory planning model. And this is a very important aspect of planning education for emergencies. The participatory approach entails the involvement of all the relevant stakeholders as expected at the various levels, whether at the primary level, the secondary level, the tertiary level, and whichever context in which it occurs. These relevant stakeholders include the family members that are affected, the children that are the school age of the various levels, the government agencies, the private agencies, and so on. All of these matter in taking decisions or making decisions in recognition of the need to provide education for victims of natural disasters. Then we also have strategic planning model. This strategic planning model is very important because this one is the one that puts the discussions into a scientific approach that enables the right things to be done at the right time. Here, it ensures that some basic studies are conducted to ensure that there is a clearer understanding of the situation so that the gap that is there will be properly understood and the nature of the context will also be understood so that the appropriate steps will be taken to provide the suitable and adequate education to be accessed by the victims of national emergencies. Then, looking at all the three that I've mentioned, it means that none of them needs to be can be thrown away. You cannot throw away social demand because we are saying that everyone matters, and that all the school-age children must be catered for in terms of the provision of education, and that there's the need to use the participatory approach, bringing on board all the relevant stakeholders, including even the learners. So we don't have to see the crisis as something that means that we have to be quickly doing something and therefore we leave out some members. If we leave them out, yes, it doesn't matter that it is an emergency situation. You may provide a kind of education that the people would not want, and so they will refuse to participate in it. And so if you take them on board, it's very important. And then doing it scientifically, bringing the issues involved to clearer understanding by all members of the stakeholder group, so that eventually the situation can be addressed adequately enough. And that is the synthetic approach. And so this is highly recommended.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Ankomah. We have listened to the different types of approaches that we can use to plan education during national emergency. Now, we shall be looking at the process of planning education during emergency. we need to bear in mind that the approach of target education is in form of the cyclic dimension. That is, it's form of a cycle. So we start with activity 1, then go to 2, go to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then go back to 1. And the first one is establishing a value base. That is the monetary value or figure to be used for projection for the program. And those that have a knowledge of school mapping will remember that the base year data is often required before projection could be made. Then the second one is determining program goals. What are the goals of education for the displaced children? Then the third, developing a conceptual framework. That is, identify the actual type of education and put it and develop a framework for the operation of education. Is it KG to senior high school education that will be provided for the displaced children? Then we need to conceptualize the form of education that we are to provide for the displaced children. Then the next one is designing the appropriate program that is suitable for the displaced children. Then the fifth, establishing program assessment procedures. How are we going to assess the performance of the displaced children in school? And then also the performance of their teachers. Then the sixth stage is implementation of the program. And the seventh and final stage is evaluation program. And what we just explained is being displayed with a graphic on the board. There, the different stages process, the circuit process is presented on the board. We have 1 to 7, and you can see them. You can see the arrow moving from the first one, establishing the value base for education, to 2, which is determining program goals, to 3, which is developing a conceptual framework, to 4, which is establishing, designing the program, then to 5, which is establishing program assessment procedures, to 6, which is implementing the program, to 7, which is evaluating, and it continues to move to 1, because it is a circle. The circle keeps revolving. Now, we have just gone through the process, the cycle process of planning education during emergency. Then, what are the stages that we need to go through? The first thing is collection and analysis of statistical data. Then, here we need to collect relevant data on the displaced children to be taught. We need to collect data on their ages, educational background, and this will enable the educational planner to be able to provide plans that make adequate provision for their educational needs. Then the next one is involving policy proposals. Right? There's a need to develop policy proposals for the education of this category of children. Then the next one is project analysis and projections. the data that has been collected will be used to project into the future needs of the education program for the displaced children. Then programming and costing educational plans. It is essential to develop suitable programs and cost the education plans for the disabled children. Then the next thing is decision making. This one is the stage at which the government will reach a decision, the appropriate decision, on how to implement the education project for the displaced children. And the next thing is the implementation, the actual implementation, which will entail a provision of infrastructure, hiring of school personnel, enrollment of displaced children, and then the operation of school system for displaced children. And then the final thing is evaluation. This entails evaluating the work being done in the school. The next issue that we need to examine is how to prevent or control national emergencies. Like the saying goes, prevention is better than cure. If most African governments are very careful, most of the emergency situations that we have in Africa were avoided. But because of emotional considerations like ethnic issues, the government in Africa often fail to take decisions at the appropriate time. It's not even only in Africa. The invasion of Ukraine is an avoidable thing, but the Western countries, they did not act on time. Even though President Trump was not a popular president, but at his time, Russia dare not invade Ukraine because they could have taken preemptive measures. In the same way, in the case of some national emergencies, creative measures by the government at the right time to save the situation. Now, let us look at the ways in which we can prevent or control national emergencies. The first one is through recognition or identification of risk. We try to identify risks. When we identify future risks, then we can try to find a way of avoiding such risks. Then we also need to rank and evaluate risk. If a country knows that with the current of the ocean, that it is likely that the ocean will overflow, creative measures could be taken. Communities are along the coastline could be relocated and several lives could be saved. And then it's also possible for the ocean to be well demarcated from where people live, so that the ocean will not be able to overflow to the city. Then there should be significant response to risk situations from the government and other stakeholders. Then when we are not able to control the risk situation, then we have to tolerate, like the Ebola and COVID-19 situation. We have to tolerate those that are infected. Then the next thing, we need to treat them. And then at times, there might be need to transfer some of the victims to a place where they do not infect others. Then we also find a way of terminating the situation leading to the emergency. And that is why centers were created in different countries where victims of coronavirus could be treated. Then resourcing controls and planning. The government will need to put in place controls on resources to be provided, and then adequate plan has to be provided. Then the action planning is also essential. When a national emergency has occurred, then there is a need for reaction planning. The government has to react to the occurrence so that it will not spread further. Reporting and monitoring risk performance is also essential. There should be a monitoring team that will be reporting this performance. Then reviewing the risk management framework. Then there should be a team that will be reviewing how effectively the risk is being managed. We have the image of displaced children that are being provided education. The image we have here is the photo of victims of war, showing young Sudanese refugees being integrated into the school system in the Republic of Chad in 2019 to 2020 school session.
All right. So, what are the implications for policy and planning? As discussed by my colleague, policy measures have to be taken into consideration. Measures have to be taken to ensure that the situation is recognized or identified early enough so that measures could be put in place to avoid it or prepare enough so that we'll be able to face it squarely. So that means that we don't have to experience emergencies and go confront it with ad hoc measures. There is the need to have appropriate mechanisms in place to ensure that whenever they occur, we are ready. So being in readiness for the confrontation of emergencies is a very, very important measure to take in every country. So now, especially as we are, the whole world, all countries are experiencing the COVID-19, this should teach us a lesson that anything can happen, and it can happen to anyone. It doesn't matter how strong or how powerful you are. It doesn't matter how weak you are. All of us have occasions where we may experience some emergency. Emergencies can occur at any time, but we do not have to wait until they occur before we come up with ad hoc measures. So there's a need for the creation of an agency for national emergencies. Even before the emergencies occur, there is a need for the agency to be set up, and a certain percentage of national budget provided, and every year some bit of it set aside so that it will be kept as the national emergency reserves. As the national emergency reserve. So once we have something like that, when the emergency occurs, it can be confronted very squarely, or at least there will be something in place already to be able to address it while other measures are also being put in place on the spot. There is the need to establish an emergency unit in the Ministry of Education itself, at the national level, at the regional level, and whatever levels that may also be needed to have them. There's the need for these emergency units to be created. These will cater for the rehabilitation and education of the victims of emergencies. So once we anticipate the possibility of some emergency occurring, whether through the natural context or through whatever situation, we have said there's a need to put in measures that will ensure that these things will not occur, but especially the natural ones, we do not have any control over. So there's a need to have the national emergency units established in the education terrain, so that when they occur, the appropriate education outside the regular one, which has been disrupted, could be provided for the school-age children victims of emergencies. Then there's also the need to put up a very good security network for the vulnerable children, especially during the emergency situation. There's the need for this kind of security network to cater for these vulnerable children. Indeed, children are the ones who need to access education to prepare them for the world of work, and then to prepare them for their effective livelihood. And yet they are the ones that are also very vulnerable during such situations. And therefore, security measures need to be put in place to ensure that they do not suffer other dangers during the emergency situation. And as we have said earlier, we are re-echoing the fact that there is the need to adopt the participatory approach and the social demand approach to the management of emergencies, especially when it comes to providing education that is suitable for the context of emergencies. There's the need to work in a participatory way, bringing on board the fact that everybody has the right to education. And so we need to have all these bodies that are relevant stakeholders on board, so that we'll be able to provide the education. We have such international organizations that could be our assistants, and they have always been doing it in Ghana here. We are aware that some of these organizations did a lot to support the COVID-19 crisis, to ensure that education would be provided to the children of school age. We have the Red Cross, we have UNICEF, we have UNESCO, we have the World Health Organization, and several others that are both local and international that we could appeal to and bring on board, so that we can make adequate, or at least suitable preparation, provision of education for the victims of emergencies. So in conclusion, we are saying that educational planning is an important tool that certainly cannot be ignored or downplayed in the management of national emergencies. It's very important. We have to, because education is very, very vital in dealing with the ravages of emergencies. There's a need to have educational planning, to plan that educational provision, so that the right things will be done and the benefits will be very, very enormous. National emergencies often disrupt the school system. We realized, especially during the COVID-19 era, especially the early part of it, Of course, we are still in it, and we are now living in a new normal, even while schools have returned to the normal situation. But at that time, there were several cases where children could not access education at all, especially those in the rural areas. Provisions were made in various forms, electronically and so on, but many still could not access it. So children will be separated from their families, especially in flood situations, in earthquakes, as happened in Haiti a few years ago, happened in other places, in conflict situations. These things do happen. And some of these children may never see their parents, their siblings, their loved ones again. So national emergencies, they are disruptive of school provision. This breach of the victim's fundamental right to education must not be swept under the carpet. It should be addressed through appropriate planning. That is why educational planning is very important. Appropriate planning. And this planning should be done pre-emergency, that is even before it happens, anticipating the possibility of an emergency occurring and making adequate planning towards it. And then also during the emergency itself, there's a need for this appropriate planning to be effected to ensure continuity in accessing education by the school age victims of national crisis or emergencies. It's very, very important. And when this has been done, we are hopeful that children will not be cut off from education. Even when the crisis occurs, they will still be accessing education, and education, the education that they will be receiving will help to mitigate the consequences of the crisis, and then at the same time also build them towards getting the benefits of education as everybody else, even during times of crisis as they are experiencing. So, ladies and gentlemen, my brothers and sisters everywhere, all over the world that are listening, we want to thank you all for listening. Thank you very much. Nana, so we hand it over back to you.
Thank you very much, Profs, for those insightful presentation. Indeed, it is said that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So planning for educational emergencies is very, very important, especially as COVID has taught us that disasters can strike at any time. So thank you very much, Professor Ankomah and Professor Fabunmi, for those insightful presentation. Thank you. At this juncture, we are going to move into questions and answers. I haven't had anyone type in their questions. So if you want to have a question, ask a question or make a comment or contribution, kindly raise your hand and you'll be called upon to do that. I want to acknowledge the presence of some of our students and participants from China who have joined this webinar. And thank you for making the time to join us. You're all welcome. And whilst we are waiting for others to decide to ask questions or make contributions, I want to reiterate the point that this webinar, you can get certificate for it at IEPA, and that it only costs 100 Ghana cedis. That's 100 Ghana cedis. So if you're participating from Nigeria, then you need to convert it into Naira. Once you pay, and I'm sure people are asking, how do we pay? You pay through mobile money payments. And I'm sure those who are outside Ghana can do that through World Remits and other mobile money platforms. Once you do that, we send you the electronic version of the certificate. Then we can arrange the physical delivery of the certificates by whatever means you want it to be done. either through paid postage at your own cost, or you can get someone to pick it up on your behalf in Ghana, whichever way we can arrange that. Great. I thought I saw a hand up for questions, but that hand has been lowered. So whilst we wait for contributions and comments, I think that I have some comments in our chat box. We say it's great presentation, very impactful, from Dr. Oyekan Opeyimi. So thank you for that comment. And I've also had comments asking about the slides. So if you registered for this webinar, you're definitely going to receive the slides because we have your emails already, and we'll send it by bulk emails to your email. So at least be on the lookout for that email from IEPA, latest by next week. Great. So I have a hand up. Dr. Ore Sanjo has a question, and please go ahead and ask your question or make your comment.
Yeah, good afternoon or evening.
Good day to you.
Yeah. I commend the two professors for good presentation and well explicit in their presentations. But my planning is good, no doubt about that. As you have likely said, that failing to plan is planning to fail. But in the area of data, how could planning be effective in preparation to the discourse at hand that has to do with planning education for national emergency? Because when you look at Africa as a whole, you will discover that we don't have an update data that we can make do in having a very good plan. Why all this? And what are the way out from all this inadequacy in data presentation? That's my question. I'm talking from Nigeria, Nahepa, Ondo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Rather than Nahepa. Okay.
So over to you, professors.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, in Africa, you have rightly said that we have the challenge of data, statistics. Sometimes the kind of data that we have on our hands is spurious. It doesn't represent the reality. Sometimes people doctor data in various ways to suit certain situations. But by and large, planning has to be done with some data. As we said, it is important to use data, whether if we have to plan effectively. And so there's a need somehow to go around it. We need to find out, sometimes we need to appreciate the situation in this context and be able to come out with some kind of figure or figures that are likely to represent the reality. We may not get the full picture, but we will be able to get to some level of adequacy in terms of the data, especially in crisis situations. It is not very easy to get the right data specifically, but we can make some meaningful guesses if we go close to the source. We go close to the source and then make every effort. We will be able to appreciate the enormity of the situation and be able to prefer some kind of figure that may represent the reality. We may not be able to get the fullness, but we will be able to get something, because it is very important that we use figures in our planning to make the planning effective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ankomah. I thought I saw another hand up. Okay, that hand has been lowered. Now, colleagues from
our Navy, our Nana of Africa.
colleagues from
hello.
Nana, Professor Fabunmi wants to talk.
Yes, please go ahead, Prof.
Yeah, I want to talk of what Professor Ankomah said. inaccurate data and total lack of data has been a problem in Africa. And the situation is being compounded by the situation in which we find ourselves. In most of the ministries, the wrong people are put in charge of statistics and planning for education. And by the time that education system analysis is being done, those that are interested in terms of educational planning will be the one that will be analyzing system, the education system, when they don't know anything about system analysis. One will expect renowned professors. I understand, I can see that Professor Mon Mwadiani is here. He's a renowned professor of educational planning. We have people like Babalola and many others back in Nigeria. They will not be involved. And even people in IEPA that ought to be leading controlling data collection for education in Nigeria, they are not well given enough allocation so that they can do this appropriately. We have many educational planners in most African countries, but they are not engaged in the work. And back to the problem of national emergency situation, the situation is traumatic that even during emergency, when you ask some of them for their names, they may not remember their names. They may not be able to tell you their correct ages. So it takes a long time of rehabilitation before you can get concrete information for planning. But the provision of education for displaced school children cannot wait. So whatever data the government is able to get, then they have to commence, they have to start doing something. And it is always better for the government to take preemptive measures, plan ahead of the occurrence so that it will not occur. And when it finally occurs, then it will not come when you are not ready. So it is always good to prepare ahead of time. Before I stop, I would like to thank the eminent administrators that are participating in this program. I can see retired university registrars, some professors that are retired, then and many other scholars from different countries. So we thank all of you for participating. Thank you, our coordinator.
Thank you very much, Prof. Fabunmi. We have a hand up, Dr. Ore. Sorry.
Oresoya.
Oresoja, yeah.
It's from the Nigerian type of IEPA.
Yeah, okay.
IEPA. Okay. Yeah.
Please go ahead with your comment or question, Doc. I think you're muted, so if you can.
Yeah. Please support yourself. You are not hearing me.
Prof, we can hear you because I think the
Not Oresajo that is speaking.
Please start again.
This is Oresajo from IEPA, Nigeria.
Good.
Hello?
Go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
We cannot hear.
Yeah.
Professor Fabunmi is my mentor to the call. If only Prof can recall. You have done justice to everything, the two of you. But my worry still remains that can we continue in this trend and be having better results? Because where our decision of yesterday, this is the result today. What are we planning for the future to avert all these issue of insurgents and then what have you in our country, Nigeria? That's it. Hello.
Okay.
It's not only in Nigeria. It happens in different African countries. Emotional considerations are built into decision making, and that is why we don't often get it right now. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could add, actually, it is not only in Africa, it is all over the world. And as I speak now, I just received a message sent by the Nigerian government to the Nigerian nationals in Ukraine, warning them to be very careful so that if things escalate, they will be able to take care of themselves and not be caught up in the crisis. You see, it is a worldwide situation. And of course, maybe in Africa, we are experiencing it in a more sustained way. It continues and continues and continues from the north down to the south. We are experiencing it everywhere. It is happening in Somalia, it's happening in Sudan, it's happening in Ghana, it's happening in Nigeria, it's happening in Niger, it's happening in Libya, everywhere it is happening. And look at the coups that have occurred in recent times in the West African sub-region. It is happening, but we need to maybe sit back and make certain considerations, because if we keep on going like this, development will be stunted and will not get where we need to be. We are far behind in many contexts, and that there is a need for us to shelve our emotions and look working together as a team, working with those people that we call opponents. See them as brothers and sisters, see them as colleagues. If we are able to get to this level, I believe that we can avoid many of the conflicts that are plaguing our nations. Of course, the natural disasters we cannot avoid, but if we do well, we will be able to avoid the conflicts, the insurgencies, the terrorisms, and so on. We'll be able to avoid them or to mitigate them to a very low level, so that we can navigate properly into the top levels, so that our economies will grow and we will be able to experience development in our countries. Thank you very much. Yeah, Nana, back to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, now that we can hear.
Great. Whilst the discussion was going on, I had some comments and I would like to read them so we can discuss them. The first one is Professor Veji Oyeni. Hope I got that right. And it says that our frustration in Nigeria is that why you don't have core professionals in charge of educational system. Most national or sectional emergency situations are hardly matched with appropriate planning models. Hence, victims suffer multiple losses. So that's a contribution to that. I also have a question from IEPA from Dr. Afre, which says that, can you throw more light on the specific security measures to help school-aged children during emergencies? So that's a, and I repeat, can you throw more light on specific security measures to help school-aged children during emergencies? Then there's also another question from Dr. Oyekan. What do we do to bottleneck politically, especially in Nigerian educational system, where professionals are not recognized and false data promoted more than genuine ones because of selfish individuals? Wow. Okay, so those are the questions and comments. Over to you, presenters.
Thank you very much. Let me hazard some responses. The first question is similar to the third one, where we talking about square pegs in round holes. We are using non-professionals to deal with crisis situations, and so we are always doing things wrongly, and the results are not pleasant. The children who have to get it right are not getting it right because we are having people who are not professionals dealing with the situation, and they do not know how to handle situations, and sometimes they even end up compounding the problems. Yes. So this means that we need to professionalize situations. We need to get the right people. We need to get them trained. Training is something very important. And I know that in African countries, we have professionals all over. In Nigeria, we have top professionals. In Ghana, we have top professionals. If you go across the African continent, we have professionals all over. Sometimes if it's necessary, we may have to get others from other countries, and we do not need to look to the north. We have them in our region, in the African region. We have them. We can get them from different places and ask them to come to provide support to enable us to do the right things at the right times. And as we have already said, we need to start early. We need to do it when the situation is not, we have not met the situation itself. We need to anticipate and use the professionals to do the planning. When this is done, it is likely that when the situation occurs, we will be able to handle it more professionally. So it is important that we get the professionals. We don't have to use this nepotism, using our family members, our friends, our particular cronies, using them as pawns to deal with situations. That will always bring us back to square one. So I think it's very important that we get the professionals in place to do the right things. And then the issue of the security measures to help deal with the children, Professor Fabunmi is going to talk about that one. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Dr. Yaw Afari, thanks for that question. Like I said the other time, that preemptive measure is always very good. It's a way of preventing catastrophe. Most of the times, insurgents will write school heads or head teachers or principals, whatever title is given to them in your country. Insurgents will write them that they will be coming to their school on so-so day or on a particular day. The school head will communicate with the ministry. The Minister of Education will not take any step. The school head will not do anything. Most of the times, they will resort to praying. Prayers are very good, but you have to back up prayers with action before it will work. By the time King David, before he became king, before confronting Goliath, he prayed and he made effort. Without effort, Goliath could have killed him. So before Goliath could do something, he had used his catapult and got Goliath killed. Like the security of most African students in Ukraine now, one would expect the different African embassies in Ukraine to have relocated their students in that country back home when the crisis was starting. They didn't do that. Now that the war is commencing, they are sending notes to the students that they should not fear. We pray that the war will not escalate, that everything will come back to normalcy. it is always good to take preemptive measures before the occurrence of an emergency situation. And then to control emergency, it is better for the government to make enough allocation to different schools or educational institutions within the country. Most of the schools are porous. There are no fences. Many of the schools are fenced with ordinary flowers that even students can jump over the flowers and escape from the school system. It is good to have good fences for educational institutions, and then to have presence of security officers in the different educational institutions in every country. And it is good to police every country very well. Many people may not want to travel to some countries that they refer to as police nations. But me, I'm comfortable with them because they will stress you with interrogation, but you know you are safe in that country. It is good to have at least a policeman to 400 citizens, but in most African nations, we don't have enough security. And that is because of security issues in these countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Well, our time is fast spent, and you've all made valuable inputs. I have two, I think, questions here and a comment. Now I'd like to read them, and that is the last set of questions because we need to respect each other's time, participants. So it says that from Tony Love, looking critically at budget provisions for education in Ghana across Africa, one can see that the money allocated for education is just inadequate. Professors, what is your take in that? We allocate huge sums of money for other things, and that I feel are not necessary for education. So that is one. The second question is, how do we finance emergencies in absence of donors and in situations where the central government focuses its expenditure on flagship program implementation? And there's a last one, which is a comment. I think the starting point in planning for education during emergencies is to begin with a policy document that is relevant and practicable. Most countries in this part of the world has national policies. Countries have national educational policies that do not contain any policy position on emergencies. So that's from Dr. Atolagbe Ade. Atolagbe Ade Dapo. Good. I think I got that right. Close. So over to you, Prof. So that's the last set of questions.
Yeah, let me take the first question. And Professor Ankomah can talk of. The first question is that inadequate allocation is often made to education in Ghana. To be sincere, I must compare, to be sincere, I must commend the government of Ghana. When you look at allocation to education in Ghana, usually about 32% of the national budget is often devoted to education. Back home in my country, the allocation to education, the highest, will be 60%, and most of the time it will be below 8%. So, and that's why I want to commend Ghana. But the problem is not even with the allocation going to education in Ghana. The problem is that the allocation to education which I feel is above the recommendation by UNESCO. UNESCO recommended about 26%, but the Ghana government usually project about 30% for education. But the problem in Ghana is that a big proportion of educational allocation goes on administration, and thus a smaller proportion going for the actual teaching and learning in schools. So that's the problem with educational allocation. And even in Nigeria and some other countries, where the allocation to education is small, it is true they will tell you that they have improved it. Like I said in the announcement that I made during my inaugural, that you can see the figures increasing on an annual basis, but is the actual value of money increasing? When you try to convert back to the stable American dollar, you will discover that what we feel has been increasing has actually been decreasing. And then in these other African countries, just like Ghana, the bulk of the allocation for education usually go for administration. Less is being spent on actual teaching. I hope you are satisfied with that.
Yes, I think that the other questions are related somehow. In other words, we are looking at situations where but allocations are made to education that don't seem to be adequate enough because we think that we are spending money in other areas that don't seem to be relevant enough to us. And somehow, as Professor Fabunmi said, even the allocation to education, the component that goes to teaching and learning seem to be inadequate. The greater part, the chunk of it goes to administration. So there is the need to look at the allocation situation critically in the African countries so that with the letter that is given, adequate provision will be made out of that for the teaching and learning, the real issues. And so what we are saying is that, yes, we have these challenges in our government setups. These are policy issues, but it is an appeal that we are making because if we make the right allocations, even if the quantum is not huge, but people feel that indeed the governments are making the right efforts to deal with the situation, it will help to curb some of the confrontations that come up, the standoffs that we often experience, and so on, so that strike actions and all these things will not occur. It's important that we do these things, but we cannot also say that because we don't have enough to pay teachers and to pay for workers and so on, we will not plan for emergencies. That will be very, very dangerous. That will be very dangerous. So that when the crisis occurs, then it's then that we are going to play around using ad hoc measures. That is dangerous. Educational planners frown at that very seriously. We need to plan. That is the essence of planning. Planning always looks ahead. And so we need to anticipate it and therefore make some allocation. It doesn't matter how small the allocation is. In relation to what we are using for running the day-to-day activities. So certainly there's the need for government to make sure that they make some allocation annually during their budget planning, so that when the situation occurs, when the crisis situation occurs, we would be able to deal with them. We don't have to stop planning against emergencies. It's important, whatever the situation is, we need to make every effort to make allocations towards that, and we need to plan. We can't plan without money, and for that matter, we need to make the monetary allocations available so that the appropriate planning can be done against emergencies. Whatever the situation, we need to do that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, our coordinator.
Thank
please.
you very much, professors. Our time is fast spent. We've gone almost 12 minutes off time. And I know others have other meetings to attend, including myself. So thank you very much for your time. And I appreciate every participant who made time to join us. The IEPA webinar series happened on the last Thursday of every month. So the next one is coming up on the 31st of March, 2022. Kindly follow us on our social media pages, IEPA, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. And you will see updates of our webinar series and other capacity building events that are coming up, and you can sign in. Also follow us on our websites, which I shared, IEPA, and also you will know what is happening at IEPA, what other programs are coming up, and you can join. To all those who indicated through their registration forms that they would want to receive information on upcoming webinars, we are going to do well to communicate with you on the next set of webinar series that are coming up. And if you decide that you want a certificate for this program, kindly go back to your registration email and just respond that you need a certificate, and we will adequately cater for you. So thank you very much, Professor Ankomah and Professor Fabunmi, for that insightful presentation. We will send the presentation to all participants, of course. Thank you for joining us. Until next month on the 31st, do have a lovely day. And thank you for our Nigerian participants, our participants who have joined us from China, global, and everywhere. And also those in Ghana and UCC, thank you very much. Have a lovely afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Prof, I greet you, sir. Professor.